Hi, my name is April, and for my research paper I did the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale. So Morris Rosenberg created this scale in 1965, and he created it because there wasn't much understanding or research on self-esteem, and it was actually a bit of a mystery, and so he wanted to understand it better. So he actually believed that self-esteem was multidimensional, that it was made up of a lot of different aspects. And some aspects that he focused on were reflected appraisals and social comparisons. So when understanding reflected appraisals, it's important to note that part of the human experience is seeing others' perspectives, and with this we take on the role of the other. And when we do, we come to the understanding that others are also watching and evaluating us. And so we begin to see ourselves through their eyes. And with social comparisons, after we become aware of others' perceptions, we begin to um, either negatively or positively compare ourselves to others. And putting these different aspects of self-esteem together bring us to global self-esteem. And global self-esteem is defined as the individual's positive or negative attitude toward the self as a totality. And so global self-esteem is what Rosenberg was wanting to measure when he created the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So the scale consists of 10 items. It's a really short and simple scale, and there are 5 positive items, and an example of one of the statements is, I feel I am a person of worth, at least on an equal plane as others. And there are also 5 negative statements. An example of that is, I feel I do not have much to be proud of. And they're arranged on the form, and he actually used 5 positive statements and then 5 negative to assess self-esteem as a way to eliminate response bias, which I thought was really cool and interesting. So it's arranged as a Likert scale, a 4-point Likert scale, and we actually used Likert scales a lot in school as the course evaluations and teacher evaluations that we fill out. So it's simply after each statement has the words strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree, and one of those is simply selected. And the scores can range from 0 to 30 or 10 to 40. I've seen them scaled both ways. It just depends on how each person wants to score it. And when scoring, numbers 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7, or the positive statements, should be scored starting at strongly agree being worth 3, agree being 2, disagree being 1, and strongly disagree being 0 if you're going from 0 to 30. And 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10, or the negative statements, should be scored oppositely. And so you start with strongly agree being 0 and go the other way. And that's just to make it so the self-esteem lower numbers equal lower self-esteem and higher numbers equal higher self-esteem. So the cutoff is actually from 0 to 15 is low self-esteem, from 15 to 25 is normal, and from 25 to 30 would be considered high self-esteem. Okay, so for the reliability, I took 2 studies, and the first study, the researchers gathered 699 ex-prisoners and administered the assessment to them. And they actually concluded that instead of it just measuring one conduct of global self-esteem, that it actually measures 2 distinct conducts. And those would be negative self-esteem and positive self-esteem. And they both measured with very good reliability. And the second study, the researchers took 851 students from the University of Northern Thailand, and they actually reworded one of the statements that they thought was hindering the assessment, and they changed it from "I wish I would have more respect for myself" to "I think I'm able to give myself more respect." And they actually found that even with the revised and the original version were both equally reliable. For validity, I also took 2 studies, and in the first study, the researchers took a high school sample of 1,084 males and 1,024 females from Alberta, Canada. And the males actually scored higher than the females, which I thought was interesting. And from the data they gathered, they found positive correlations that led them to believe that the assessment has good construct validity. And in the second study that I used, the researchers took a sample of 665 males and 665 females from comprehensive schools in England. And once again, the males scored higher than the females on the assessment, and the results also equaled good construct validity. And yeah. All right, so I actually used 2 of the studies the 2 studies I used in validity to look at, and because I thought it was interesting that both of them showed that males actually had higher scores than females. So the males' mean in the first study was 31.36, while the females' mean was 21.32. And in the second study, the males' mean was 31.26, and the females' mean score was 28.31. So I just thought it was interesting that in 2 separate studies, they found that females scored lower on it. And it's important to point out that in the first study, the researchers noted that even though the females scored lower, that doesn't necessarily mean that they should conclude that females have lower self-esteem, because they simply have different response styles to males, and they may be less egotistic and more self-deprecating. And in the last study that I used, it was a study where they had adolescents from Ireland take the assessment, and they used 7,706 adolescents, and they found that males had a mean of 27.7 and females had a mean score of 27.4, and so males were still scoring higher, but it was not quite as significant with this study. So administering this assessment is very simple. You only need a computer or a pen and paper. You can print this assessment off of the internet, and it requires no training to give. It's very quick and easy to take and simple for the client, and it's a good way to start a treatment to get a baseline for how the client feels about themselves and where they are, and it's also a good way to monitor their progress. You can periodically give them the assessment again and see how they're doing and see how efficient your program is at helping them to grow to have better self-esteem. And so overall, this assessment was very valid and reliable and very quick and easy and effective for any practice, really. Thanks, guys.